Hello, I'm Jeremy Arnold, Senior BI Developer at OneBridge in Indianapolis, and I'm coming back to you today with another Intro to Power BI video series. Alright, now that we talked about DAX and measures and what they are and why you should use them, we're going to talk about a little bit more of an advanced topic next. We're going to talk about quick measures. How do you access them in Power BI Desktop? What do they do and why you should use them? Hint, they're really good at teaching you how to DAX because it does the DAX for you and you can manipulate them very easily. And then we're going to talk about some basic syntax around some of the most commonly used functions, things like sum, count, and average. Simple stuff to get you started on your DAX journey. All right, and we're back. So in our last section we talked about what is DAX and what are measures and how does DAX make measures and stuff like that. But now we're going to talk about quick measures. What are they? How do they function? What do they do? How can they help you? And they can actually help you in a myriad of ways. And I actually like to use them a lot in terms of helping me actually learn how to DAX better. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we'll walk through a couple examples of some common DAX formulas, talk through their syntax, what they do, how they function, and how they operate. So quick measures are easy to use, pre-scripted measures. They can be accessed easily, and Power BI writes the DAX for you, which is really cool. And there's a huge number of functions that you can make with a quick measure. So let's take a quick example. So I'm going to take this wins value again. I'm going to do right here, new quick measure. Okay. So here are all the calculations that are currently available in quick measures. And I will say, to Microsoft's credit, they take submissions for new quick measure calculations. And if they work out really well, Microsoft will implement them in their monthly update, and they do add to this list. But let's just kind of walk through a couple of these. So average per category, variance per category, max, min, weighted average. Filters, filtered value, difference from filtered value, a lot of time intelligence, year to date, quarter to date, month to date, year over year, quarter over quarter, month over month, rolling average stuff, running totals, and we'll actually use the running total example here in a minute, total for category, and then, filters applied, filters not applied, math operations, add, subtract, multiply, divide, percentage difference, correlation coefficient, and then there's some text stuff here, and we're not going to really talk about that too much today. So let's talk about a good example here using this running total number. So let's say I want to know from the beginning of my data set, what year did a franchise hit a certain number of wins. So let's say I want to know, when did the Indiana Pacers win their 500th game as an NBA franchise? Well, that's a good question. Well, to do that, I'd have to have a running total of their wins from the beginning of my data set that I will basically add onto each year, right? So my base value is the sum of wins. Let's see here. Make sure I do this correctly. So, and then let's go, I think it has to be descending. I think that's right. So the base value is sum of wins, year. And the cool thing about quick calculations, and you can see I got this correctly, is you can always see the DAX, which again, this is really nice. The thing I like about quick measures so much is that you can see the DAX, you can see the DAX it generates, and you can sort of walk through it and understand what's going on. So right now it's calculating the sum of wins and it's filtering it by year, which is what I want it to do. And it's starting from, hey, whatever the minimum year is, that's where you have to start. I've kind of already created one of these, so that's why it's number 2 here, because I already have an example in here. So let's remove this, but let's, because we want to look at teams. Let's make that a filter. Let's look at my beloved Pacers. So the Pacers have won 1,628 games as a franchise. since the 1976-1977 season. And in that year, they won 36 games. So obviously their ABA history will not be in here because this is an NBA data set. So now, if I take this, oh yeah, I have to actually add the year. That would be helpful. Let's filter by year here. Oh look, so I made a mistake, right? Because now it's giving me the total in ascending order, but I really want it descending. Cool thing, I could edit the quick measure in the quick measure window, right? Like I could edit it, or I can just change this ASC, and this is very similar to SQL syntax. The ASC means ascending, DESC means descending. I'm gonna remove that ASC now, put that back. And oh, look at this. Now I have the wins running total. And of course it says in 2 because I have one already. So let's go ahead and remove that and put the original one in. And I can say, okay, so, and we can do and the reason why I have the sum of wins in here is so we can sort of validate that it's behaving as expected. So in the first year, there were 36 wins. We had 31 to 36, yeah, that's 67. And 38 to 67, yeah, that's 105. Okay, so the quick measure is doing what it's supposed to do. And then we can sort of see very quickly and say, hey, oh, and that, so somewhere in that 1990-91 season, the Pacers won their 500th game. I don't have game-by-game detail in this data set, so I can't tell you exactly which game it was. But I know what happened in that 1990-91 season. Now, let's compare that to, say, maybe... Let's take a look at the Knicks, right? I mean, that's a New York storied franchise. Their history goes back all the way to 1946, 1947, which is as old as this data set gets. So we're talking, they've been around for a long time. They won their 500th game in the 59-60 season, and they've won, as a franchise, 2,720 games. And that's really, really incredible. So interestingly though, you'll see after, I think it's 15, 16. Yeah, so you'll see like my data set becomes a little more incomplete, which is natural in data sets, and we could repopulate it, but let's ignore 15, 16 for now because we know everything kind of good, at least through 2014, 2015. So here, the Knicks won 17 games in 2014, 2015, according to the state set. It's pretty harsh. 76ers won 18 games. It's pretty harsh. I mean, it's not like the Pacers were killing people either. Had 38 wins that season. But, there were some surprising teams. I mean, this was a year the Hawks won 60 games. The Warriors won 67 games. I mean, listen, that was a heck of a team in 2014, 2015. But what we were able to do with the quick measure, and you can see the quick measure is also still contextual, right? When we pick the year, we can walk through it. It says is on or after the minimum of the team history year, right? Well, when we pick the year, that becomes the minimum. So the measure is still functioning as we expected, and that's really great. It's doing exactly what we expected it to do. And it's still completely contextual. So let's say I remove the year again, and as we sort of showed before, like where did the wins come from? If I sort it by year, I can sort of say, hey, what's going on here? Now, one thing that I do want you to note is look at the total, right? So this running total is working correctly, and then you get to the total, and you're like, wait a minute. They should have 1,745 wins. Why does it only show 23? Well, again, you have to look at what the measure is doing. So we're going to bring it back up here. So the measure here is, saying I need the sum of wins. I need you to filter by the year and look for the minimum year. Like that's what we're doing. Well, the issue is that in the total line, it only selects one item, and that selects the minimum year. So it's only getting that that minimum value, which you can see again is the 23 wins here from the 67-68 season for the Supersonics. So just something to be aware of with quick measures. I mean, they can have, some things that might look like some wonky interactions, but you can just go back to the DAX. And again, if you're not sure what a DAX statement is doing, like I mentioned earlier, we'll provide a link to the DAX function reference guide, so you can sort of work through each of those functions in the reference guide and say, hey, what does this function do? What is it? What is it doing mechanically? You can sort of look a lot of those things up and maybe get some more context around these things. You know what? Let's do another quick measure here. So, and this one will just be something completely new. I won't have this one predefined. So let's do a new quick measure. And let's do the max. So what I want to know is the right. So I want to know the max number of wins. And I don't know if this will actually function as I expect here. So let's take a look at it. Keep filters by year. Yeah, so it's going to keep the filter. So this one I do not expect to do what I think it's going to do, right? Right, because it's filtered by year. So it's telling me, oh, what was the max number of things you won per year? Well, it's not exactly doing what I want it to do. So that's, again, something you have to be kind of careful of, because it's not going to tell me, hey, what year was it that you won the most amount of games? It's gonna be contextual. So that's just something you have to keep in mind. So let's actually remove this. Let's go ahead and delete this one, and let's see if we can't figure out a way to frame that. Let's figure out a way to frame that. So let's say that's a new quick measure. I want to do the max per category. And the category. Yeah, see, when I put this in here, it's going to say, well, what's the base value? Well, so that's not quite going to work. Now, could we write our own measure to do it? Yes, but just from a quick measure perspective, the reason why I show you that is I want you to be aware that quick measures don't do everything out of the box, but they do a lot of things. And if I'm thinking I could probably do that correctly, but I don't know why I'm kind of having a moment right now. So that one's not quite doing what I want it to do. So let's see here. So we did running total. So actually, you know what? Let's go to a different data set, because I think this would be a really good example. So here I'm using the NBA season data, and actually, you know what? We're going to stop. I completely got flustered there. So let's take back everything before. Let's take everything back before I started to try to do the max by year, because that's where I kind of got flustered and kind of got messed myself up. So when we talk about quick measures, we did the quick measure successfully on the running total. Yeah, so okay. So there's that. Okay, so let me try that again. So we were working through quick measures. We made the quick. You know what? I'm gonna just do this whole section over again. We're gonna start from the beginning. Let's scrap the whole thing. I'm just going to scrap the whole thing, and we're going to start over from scratch, because that was really bad. All right. So, okay. So we're going to start over on this quick measure section. All right. All right, in 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. So in our last section, we talked about, what measures are and what DAX is and how you use DAX to create measures and why you would want to create them. In this section, we're going to talk about quick measures. What are they? How do they function? What do they do for you? How can you learn from them? And then we'll talk about some basic DAX statements, and we'll talk about their syntax and how they work. So here I have an example. We're still working with our NBA team history. I have all the records for all the teams going back as far as, for where it's applicable to like 1946. So pretty far back. And let's say I wanted to know when a team got its 500th win. Like, what year did that happen? Well, that would be something that out of the box isn't something you would think to do. But there is a thing called quick measures. And what quick measures do is they're easy to use, pre-scripted measures. They can be accessed easily in Power BI. It writes the DAX for you, and they can get you some insights very quickly. The other thing I like about quick measures is that you can look at the DAX and you can sort of quickly learn DAX from those quick measures and understand those things a little bit better. So let's pick a specific team. Let's take a look at my beloved Pacers here. So here I have their records going back to 1976-77. So this is just after they left the ABA. And I want to know, what year did they win their 500th basketball game in the NBA? Well, if I were to just use this sum of wins total, right, which we made earlier, let's put it in the right place. That would be good. Well, I know they won 1,628 games. And yeah, I could go through and manually add these. Okay, 36 plus 31, but I don't want to do that. I want to do that. I want to have it do it for me. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to right click. I'm going to select quick measure. And there's a huge number of calculations in here. So aggregates per category: average, variance, max, min, weighted, filtered values, difference from filtered value, percentage difference from filtered values. A lot of time intelligence, year over year, quarter over quarter. Rolling averages, a lot of math stuff: add, subtract, multiply, divide, percentage difference, correlation coefficient. We're going to look at this running total. And what this running total will do is it'll say by category, basically add up all the values before it. So I want to know here, by year, what is my sum of wins? And do I want that to be ascending or descending? I'm not too worried about it right now. So I'm just going to press the OK button. It's going to name the measure for me. And if I press this button here, I can see, oh, look, it shows me the DAX. So it's using the calculate function to do a sum, and it's filtering by the year, and then where it has to be after the max of the team history, and then it's descending. Okay, great. So I'm going to throw this in here. Well, look at that. So now I have this running total, and I can say, oh, well, they were at 464 after the end of the 1989-90 season. They got to 505 during the 1990-91 season. So their 500th win happened in the 1990-91 season. That's great. That was very quick. We were able to quickly identify when that happened with this running total. The cool thing about quick measures is, like all other measures, they are contextual unless you tell them not to be contextual. So let's say I wanted to know when did this happen for the 76ers, right? 76ers, long franchise. Their history goes back to 63-64. They won their 500th game in the 74-75 season. The Bulls, this happened for them in the 1977-78 season, according to our data set. So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff here. And, with the simple quick measure, we were able to identify that. Now, let's say we wanted to play around with this. And like, what happens if I were to make this min instead of max? Or like, what would happen? Okay, well, you can see in this case, Didn't really do much. There was no contextual. Wait a minute. What's up with that total? So let's go back to max, which is the way it was originally built. Okay, so 2,136. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's say I make it min now. Well, it's 33. Well, what? Why did it do that? Well, the cool thing about a quick measure is, you know, if you mess it up, you can always just remake it from the menu, which is really fantastic. You're like, oh, I worked up that measure. I don't know what I did, but you know what? I know how I created it in the first place. Just recreate it and try again. But in this case, we kind of know what happened. So let's actually look through the syntax here. So it's on or after the minimum of the year, and it's in descending order. So when I'm using the min, it's saying it's what was basically the value from that minimum year. And it's using a rolling total, so it's only going to say, hey, so from the minimum year in the total, what was it? Well, you're going basically in reverse order. Oh, there's only one value there. It's that first year's value. But when I use the max value, which is what the quick measure did correctly, now it's going to say, oh, so you still want the total to be referencing that max value, which is what it should do in a rolling total. That last max total of the winning total was 2136. Oh yeah, see, that's from the max year. So it's referencing that value. So that's absolutely behaving as expected, but we're able to validate that very quickly. So the cool things about different quick measures is you can use them, again, to learn DAX. So, I mean, this is a really nice calculate function. It's using the filter function, the all selected function, and the is on or after function. Those are all really neat functions that you can sort of play around with and see what they do in a way that is relatively safe, because you can always recreate the base quick measure very easily from the quick measure menu. Let's actually look at another example of this. So here I have a list. In this case, I'm looking at my beloved Pacers again, and I've got a little bit of a cool graph here. I'm showing their record, their win total, right? We kind of showed that earlier. Actually, I'm going to put this one in because we know that one's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I've got a measure now. It's called rolling win total, where I'm basically dividing the win total, the running total in the year divided by the wins and the losses, because the wins and the losses are the total number of games played, right? Because you either win or lose. It's a binary kind of thing. So I was able to take this quick measure and put those quick measures together using some very simple DAX to come up with this rolling win percentage. So now I can say, hey, have the Pacers as a franchise in their history ever reached that 50% win mark? It's interesting to note that they have not, although they're getting pretty close. Over the course of their entire franchise now, they're 1,628 and 1,646. That's pretty darn close to a 50% win rate. It's pretty neat. Let's take a look here at a different franchise, though. Let's take a look at, not the Bucks, let's take a look at the Bulls. So, the Bulls are an interesting case, right? So you look at their first, they were pretty bad for a while. And then they just had a really good number of seasons. Like the early 70s were just fantastic for them. And we can see that, right? 51-31, 57-25, 51-31, 54-28. Like the early 70s, the early mid-70s were fantastic for the Bulls. And then they just went into this long decline. They had a number of years where, they had one winning season. That 76-70-17, they had one winning season, before 1987-88. Interestingly enough, or I guess they did have a second one here in 80-81, I apologize. What happened in 1987-1988? Well, that's a very good question. And we're going to go back one more point, and we're going to look. Let's see here. If I wanted to know, I'm just going to make a new table here. Let's take a look at players. So I think I have a thing for player name, right? Hold on. Let's Player. All right, it's player. So not going crazy here. Just P-Q. Player. All right, so I have a bunch of players. And I want to know their year. And what I really want to know, though, is I want to know... I don't want to summarize. I'm going to create a little filter here, though. And I want to know by player. You probably know where I'm going right now. So I'm going to go find M is for Michael. Michael Jordan. I currently, whoops, I have that, so that's not what I do. So Michael Jordan started his career in 1985. And I look at the Bulls here. Okay, so, started off kind of rough, and then, they 50-42, and then you can sort of see here, it seems like Michael finally kind of breaks through. And then after that, it's the Michael Jordan show. So you can see here, they kind of hit this low trough here in 84-85. Michael joins the team, and then it's all up from there. And you can see, they go all the way up to a franchise career winning record of 55% after the 1997-98 season, where Michael Jordan won his 6th championship in 8 years. That's really cool. Like, we were able to figure that out pretty quickly. Like, we could sort of, use some human intelligence. Like, why would the Bulls have gotten so much better? Like, why would they have been in this trough in the mid-'80s and be way up here by the late 90s? Well, the arguably best player to ever play basketball joined your team and, was the dominating force of the NBA for over a decade. Oh, well, that would make sense, wouldn't it? So you can sort of see where, in the Bulls' case, because we did some stuff with these measures, we were able to sort of quickly identify that. And we were able to use some quick measures to provide us some additional context. Now, there is one thing I actually want to note in here, because, this rolling win percentage is actually a combination of 2 quick measures. So I didn't create this losses running total live. I had this created before, but I just did a very simple thing. So, where again, we talked about earlier, a DAX statement has to reference either a table or a column. Well, the measures themselves actually do. So you could, in theory, write the manual DAX for these, but one of the nice things about Power BI is if you have measures, you can reference the measures in DAX and it'll do that auto replacement for you. So again, it is contextual. It will sort of say, oh, I know what this measure means. It's an alias for this entire DAX statement, and you can use it that way and do some really cool stuff with it. So you can see I'm just taking this running wins total and dividing it by the sum of the wins and losses, which is, the number of games, and coming up to a running win percentage that way. So now that we've kind of looked at a quick example of a quick measure, we've talked about how they can be used, let's actually take a minute and walk through some DAX basics. Like, what does it mean? So let's say I wanted to know the count of seasons that a franchise has played. Right? So I want to know very quickly by team, how many years have each of them been in the league? That seems like a really good question. I know so it's, well, how would I do that? Well, I could actually, do this way, right? And this is a really nice test. So I can very quickly see, okay, so I have 54 years for the 76ers. The Celtics have 71 seasons. The Grizzlies are a relatively more recent franchise. The Raptors are also a relatively recent franchise. The Pelicans, they're a little bit older than this. We don't have it all the way through the 2018 season in our data set, but they're a relatively new franchise, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say I wanted to do this in DAX because I may want to reference this formula in a different way. So we're going to use a very simple count function. So we're going to create a new measure, and we'll call this years in league. Use the count. And we're going to say, oh, I want you to count the year. And that's it. Right? And we're going to leave it completely contextual. And now if I take this here, you see I get the same value. Now, let's say, so I have this, and let's say I want to know what's the total of wins that a team has had. Actually, we've done wins. Let's talk about how many times a franchise has lost in its history. Well, that would be a sum, right? So we're going to make a new measure. Sum of losses equals sum. And it's going to just give me the column name. So I'm going to go in here and pick losses. And again, we're just going to keep it very basic, very contextual. So, we have a lot of teams here. And let's just say, who is the most losingest franchise? It's really interesting. The Golden State Warriors have the most losses of any franchise in the NBA. And today, they seem like a dynasty. I mean, that's one of the great things about the NBA is, you can have the losingest franchise in NBA history, makes a couple of good decisions, and all of a sudden, they've got 4 perennial all-stars, and they look like an unstoppable juggernaut with Seth Curry shooting from the logo or from mid-court and seemingly being unable to miss. That's just one of the great things about the NBA. But, let's say that seems a little unfair, right? Let's say I wanted to say, who's averaged the highest number of losses? Well, that would be, the number of losses divided by the number of years. So there's 2 ways to do this. We could use the average function, which we will do, and we could use a DAX sort of combination function. We'll show you the DAX combination function first. So we're going to create a new measure, and we're going to call this losses, or average loss per year equals sum of losses divided by years in league. And we can say, let's do this. Oh, so these franchises, whoo boy, there's a reason why they were not in the league very long. The Charlotte Bobcats, averaging 51 losses a season. Michael Jordan might be the greatest player of all time, not the greatest executive of all time. Definitely not winning executive of the year anytime soon. But we could see, now this would probably make a lot of sense in a more modern NBA context. We'd say, wow, yeah, the T-Wolves have not always been a great franchise. The Clippers have always not been a great franchise. The Nets, particularly recently, have not been a great franchise. The King, I would bet you the Grizzlies are actually, that number's gone down a lot for them. They had some really good years with Zach Randolph leading that team, where they were a really nice physical team. There's a lot here to digest. We're very quick doing that, but let's try that with the average function. Let's see what happens. So we're going to use, I don't want to make a new column. We're not talking about columns today. We're talking about measures. So we'll call this average losses per year, because you can't have 2 things with identical names in your data model. That never works. It'll give you a really nasty message saying, I can't do that. So don't do that. So let's use the average of losses. Okay. Ta-da! So here, again, it's going to be fully contextual. And it's going to... But it's actually doing something different here to get to the same value. So let's actually talk about that for a second. So in our first example, where we're using the 2 DAX functions together and creating what I'm going to call an implicit average function, we're saying, listen, take the number of losses divided by the number of years in the league, and we're calling that the average losses per year. What the average function is doing is actually going back to the table and it's saying, going through that whole column, and it's saying, whatever contextual filters you give me, which in this case we gave it the team name as a contextual filter, because that's really the, everything else in here is a, and year, right? So we have the count of years, but even if we remove that, you would see it wouldn't change anything. So we're passing through to one filter, and we're saying, I want you to sum up in this column in this table all of the losses, and then I want you to calculate the average by all the contextual filters. So it's actually going through and it's saying, okay, the Packers in their one season in the NBA had 62 losses, and I find the Packers record once. 62 divided by 1 is 62. And that's what it's doing there. So it's not, it's doing the function differently than it was when we used the DAX to sort of create that implicit measure, because we're doing it explicitly. Explicit measures are going to go back to the table, right? And they're going to do the function that way. So that's just something to be aware of. So we've been able to talk about the sum function, the count function, the average function. Those are just 3 really quick, easy examples. And there will be times where it'll be sufficient in a table, just like, look, I don't need to create a measure for it. I have this value. It can be, it's a number, so it can be aggregated, and I can just say, all right, I'm going to put this here in the losses. I want to know the average, and I get the average, right? And that's fine. But if there are things you want to do with that value beyond just getting it, if it's a part of a larger calculation, make it an explicit measure. Reference that measure, and let the data model do that work for you. The great thing about measures is that they can be both a starting point, a building block, and an endpoint. They can do a myriad of things, and when you're doing that and you're doing it well, you can get insights from those 50,000 rows, from those 100,000 rows, from those 5 million rows of data that you would just never get otherwise. And you can do that across different things. I mean, we did some simple stuff here today, sum, counts, and averages, but you can certainly do things that are significantly more complex, things like standard deviations. We saw correlation coefficients in the quick measure. So all sorts of really great stuff. And one thing that you should always keep in mind when you're working with measures is what is the thing you're trying to find, and how will that aggregation help you get there? Is the aggregation itself sufficient, or is that aggregation just a piece of the puzzle? When you figure that out, you'll really be able to make measures work for you pretty effectively. All right, so today we've talked about DAX, data analysis expressions. We've talked about measures and how you use DAX to create them. Measures are those aggregations we use so we can understand large pieces of information. And then we've talked about quick measures, how you access them and what they can do for you, and then walked through some very basic DAX syntax for the most commonly used functions. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have future questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us for all of your BI needs here at OneBridge, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks so much and have a great day.